So what happens if I want to add to my AOVs a layer such as, or an AOV such as the outliner. Let's say you want to create an outline on my character and I don't have any outlines as an option here. So I can create a custom AOV and I'm gonna call it outline. So that got added there, and there is right there. So this outline could be an RGBA, red, green, and blue, and alpha. You can save as an EXR. But if you remember, we need to the outliner of the outline using a different filter. We used a contour filter for that. So that changes the way it's going to be rendered. Still, that doesn't know what kind of connection needs to do. So what I need to do is I just to select the AOV node, and under the AOV custom node, I'm going to connect on the shader. I'm going to connect a Toon shader. In this case, I want my Toon shader to render, but I want it to render only the line because the color is being rendered to the diffuse and to the shadows and all those other ones. So I want to maintain my color. I can of course change the color information. Let's say if I want to use a darker red for that, that'll be fine. And I can change the attribute for my edge detection and all that. I'm not going to play with that right now, but I can enable silhouette if you want to or not. But I can also, in order to not to render out color, I just simply turn off the base and turn off the specular or any other information that may be connected to the shader, like transmission, transparency, or emission, or anything like that. You can play with those if you want to, of course. Now, if I go and render the diffuse layer, let me just open up my window here. Let me go back to my RGBA. So there he is. Okay, so I'm going to render out my my outliner. Of course, has to render out the first time so that it can recognize them all. And I'm going to now go and look for the outliner there. So when I render it out, my outline shows up. That outline, of course, is giving me the outline plus an alpha, which is what I want, but I don't want it to give me outlines for the environment because the environment is already in the background picture. So what can I do to remove those? So the one strategy, of course, you can render out a separate file and just remove or hide the planes and everything else, but you can also have it rendered as a layer. So you can create a different layer. So let's try doing that. So I'm just gonna go and call my layer window or my setup window, which is right here, and I'm gonna create a new layer. And this layer I'm gonna call it character. And of course I'm going to create a collection for it. I'm gonna call it character. And under the collection, let me just rename it correctly, character collection. That way we at least get confused. And I'm going to add to that collection only the characters. So in this case would be, and of course the lighting information if I needed to, but in this case I don't need the lighting information. I can put it there anyways, not the environment. I'm going to add my robot. I'm going to select all my robot assets. I'm going to add them right there. So they got all added, and I make my collection visible here, or it's renderable right now. So I can just go and test out. I'm going to render it out one more time here. And you see now it's rendering just the character. I got a little noise back there that I think is just a piece of geometry that is left over somehow in my model. But you see that I just got now a layer for my character. Of course, I can also create another layer that is for everything, so that I can submit all of my sequence to render all at once. So I'm going to create another one when it's going to be say all. And in that one I create a new collection. So all collection. And of course in that collection I will put everything, including my character, my set, and that would, of course, that collection will be connected not to that layer, but to the other layers that require all of it, including, for example, the shadow or the shadow mask. Those that will need all the other parts of the thing. So of course I could submit them to render out, and I can turn them off for specific layers. So that, for example, if I am in the all layer, I can say, okay, for the all layers, I can simply say everything will be rendered here. I don't need to render the outline for the all layers, because of course I don't need to render everything, and I just simply go there and create on top of it an absolute override for the visible layer for this one. That way, when I render that out, that outlined layer won't be rendered. And I would do vice versa on the other ones. I could create and make this one visible now, and I can turn off, say for example, the shadow mask. So just turn it off there, and then create an override for the other ones that don't need to be rendered, and you decide which ones needs to have just a character, which ones need to have everything. It's up to your composition, that the compositing that will do that. And of course, after that, you just submit to render the same way we've done with the other processes. Hopefully that makes sense and it helps you. Things becomes a bit more complex, but in cases of preparing the whole thing, you can have a one single file being rendering multiple AOVs. Oh, but before I finish, I want to just clarify one thing, just to make sure that you understand. And that is that when I created the AOV, let's say for the outliner here, I created an override that made it, that outliner was turned off for this all layer. But of course, I'm going to make sure that that same layer, when I'm on the other, the same AOV, when I am on the other layer, I will make sure that that outliner will be on the other one. So, and if it is not, if it doesn't turn on and off, you gotta make sure you create an AOV for that. Okay, so not an AOV, an override for that. Say, for example, I come back here, and if it does not change, I think in this moment it's changing, it is refreshing. I created an AOVs for the mask, for example. Let me double check the mask. Under my character layer is turned off. I'm gonna go under my all layer. Now they're turned off, and I need them to be on in my all layer. So make sure that I'm on my visible layer here. I turn them on, and I create an absolute override for the specific layer. I'm gonna do the same thing for the shadow mask, so create an absolute override for that. So now if I flip back and forth, here the shadow mask is off, here the shadow mask is on. I make sure the same on the outliner. Outline is off for this layer, and for this other layer is on. So just making sure that you just create the opposite override on each layer. Hopefully that makes sense, and then you can just start fine-tuning your AOVs. This is not absolutely necessary, it's not required, but it's an extra opportunity for you to expand on the usage of AOVs with layers.